Gwonzi! Welcome to a Gwonzi Magic the Gathering EDH game. I'm Corey, one of the members of the Gwonzi play group, here to kick off the intro and the opening hands of this game. As a reminder, here at Gwonzi, we play EDH in a season format, where players are fighting for rank points based on coming in first, second, third, or fourth place. Additionally, players can earn bonus points in a separate category for being the first to do something in a game, or for just making a pretty awesome play. This game is Season 1, Game 1. That's right, the first filmed Gwonzi game, so all players are at 0 points. At the start of a new season, we leave it up to the RNG gods to see who will go first. And fate would have it that Eduardo will be first in turn order, playing his Kumena Tyrant of Orzaca deck. Keeping his first 7, a hand containing Favor of the Overbeing, Ponder, Thornwood Falls, Reliquary Tower, a Forest, an Island, and a Harbinger of the Tides. Second in turn order is Chris, playing his Breya Etherium Shaper deck, mulling his first and second hand, and then landing on a hand of 6 containing Kadoltha Forgemaster, Ethersworn Adjudicator, Temple of Epiphany, Fetid Pools, Storm the Vault, and Etherium Sculptor. Going third in turn order is Ryan, playing his Yidris Maelstrom Wielder deck, keeping his first 7, a hand featuring Fate Unraveler, Deathrite Shaman, Evacuation, Bloodfell Caves, Cinderglade, Ratko's Cardinarium, and a Swamp. And last in turn order is myself, playing Narset Enlightened Master, also keeping my first 7, a hand with Rugged Prairie, Sacred Foundry, an Island, Rhystic Study, Chromatic Lantern, Austere Command, and Reverberate. Now over to Chris for the play-by-play narration, where Eduardo will start us off piloting his Kumena deck.
Eduardo plays an island and starts the game by casting Ponder. He puts them back on top, draws, and passes. I drop a tapped Fetid Pools and pass. Ryan plays a Bloodfell Caves tapped going to 41 and passes to Corey, who drops a Sacred Foundry tapped and passes. Eduardo plays a Forest to cast a Simic Signet and passes. I play a Great Furnace for turn and cast Etherium Sculptor, discounting my artifact spells by 1. With nothing else, I pass. Ryan casts Deathrite Shaman, then plays Evolving Wilds, which he cracks to find a basic forest. Corey drops an island and passes. Eduardo plays Thornwood Falls, which enters tapped and brings him to 41 life. He then casts Black Blade Reforged and passes. I play Temple of Epiphany, entering tapped and almost scry 2 before correcting myself and scrying 1, leaving it on top. I move into combat and swing the Sculptor at Eduardo, bringing him back down to 40 and earning myself a First Blood bonus point. Then pass to Ryan. Ryan plays a Swamp, moves into combat, swings 1 at Eduardo, taking him to 39 and passes. Corey plays a Plains, then casts Rhystic Study. While the study is on the stack, I tap 2 mana and flash in a discounted Shimmermere. Once the study resolves, Corey passes. Eduardo plays an island, then casts his commander, Kumena, Tyrant of Orzaca. He then enchants her with Favor of the Overbeing, giving her +2/+2, flying, and vigilance. Eduardo didn't pay the 1 for either spell, so Corey draws 2. Eduardo passes, and I play an Irrigated Farmland tapped. Moving into combat, I swing 3 at Corey, taking him to 37, and pass the turn. Ryan drops an untapped Cinderglade for turn. He first taps 3 to suspend Wheel of Fate before realizing that Rhystic Study won't trigger until the spell is actually cast. With nothing else, Ryan passes. Corey plays a Rugged Prairie, then taps out. With the 4 mana, he casts Sensei's Divining Top and Chromatic Lantern. He then passes. Eduardo drops a Reliquary Tower, then uses the Signet to cast Kiora's Follower, paying 1 for the study trigger. In combat, Eduardo swings 4 flying commander damage at Corey, who goes down to 33. Eduardo passes, and on his end step, I flash in a discounted Mirage Mirror, also paying the 1. On my turn, I miss a land drop before casting Storm the Vault. Corey responds to the study trigger by activating his top, rearranging the next 3 cards, then drawing 1 when I can't pay. Before I move into combat, we realize Kumena has vigilance from the enchantment, and since attacking Eduardo is a bad idea, I instead direct my 3 power at Corey, chipping him down to 30. Landing damage creates a treasure token, and including the land, I now have 5 artifacts, so the enchantment transforms into Vault of Katla Khan. On his upkeep, Ryan removes a time counter from Wheel of Fate. He plays a tapped Temple of Deceit, scrying 1 and keeping it on top. Then Ryan taps 4 for Fate Unraveler, a creature that deals 1 to an opponent whenever they draw a card. Since he can't pay for the Rhystic Study trigger, Corey draws and doesn't take damage since the creature hasn't resolved yet. It does ding him on his draw step though, and on his main phase he plays a Temple of Epiphany tapped and uses the top to respond to the ETB Scry ability. He rearranges the top 3 cards, then scries 1 to the bottom. Lastly, he casts Strionic Resonator, then passes. Eduardo draws for turn and drops to 38 thanks to Fate Unraveler, then pays 1 extra to cast Lord of Atlantis. He then taps 3 mana to equip the Black Blade onto Kumena, who is now a 10-12 merfolk with Flying, Vigilance, and Island Walk. In combat, Eduardo sticks to true Voltron style and smacks the same player again, bringing Corey down to 19 life and in danger of dying to commander damage. Eduardo passes, and on his end step, I tap the vault for 5 blue to flash an Aethersworn Adjudicator. My creature should have only cost 4, but I mistakenly used the treasure token to pay for the study trigger. I untap and get dinged on my draw, then cast Skull Clamp for free thanks to the Sculptor, tapping 1 to pay for the study trigger and 1 to equip it to the Adjudicator. Missing my land drop, I pass the turn to Ryan. He draws, then plays a Rakdos Carnarium for turn, bouncing a basic to hand. Corey shames Ryan for missing his upkeep trigger, and Ryan removes another time counter, leaving 2 on the wheel. With nothing else, Ryan passes. Corey draws and drops to 18 life, then plays an island. He casts Austere Command, earning the first sweeper bonus point, and chooses to destroy all artifacts and all creatures with CMC 3 or less. Corey holds priority after cast to activate his top, rearranging the next 3 cards, then activating the top again to draw a card and put it on top of his library, losing 1 life in the process. Before losing his board, Eduardo taps 3 merfolk to draw a card and lose a life. I float 6 blue with the vault and flash in Scrap Trawler. Lastly, Ryan uses Deathrite Shaman to exile Ponder, and everyone but him loses 2 life. Austere Command finally resolves, and when Aethersworn Adjudicator dies, I draw 2 cards from Skull Clamp and lose 2 from the Unraveler. Scrap Trawler also triggers for each of my artifacts hitting the graveyard, so each allows me to return an artifact with a lower CMC to hand, putting Great Furnace, Skull Clamp, Etherium Sculptor, and Shimmermere back in my hand. Before Corey changes phases, I use the rest of my floating mana to flash in Shimmermere again and tap a land for Rhystic Study. After the stack takes a much-needed breather, Corey passes. Eduardo draws and loses 1, then casts his own Sensei's Divining Top, which greatly excites Corey. Eduardo pays the study tax for the top, but after casting Deeproot Elite, he checks life totals and decides he prefers having the mana open. In spite of the Fate Unraveler that's still on the board, Corey chooses to draw and drops to 14 life. Eduardo passes, and on his end step I flash in Skull Clamp, not paying the 1. Corey draws again, going down to 13. Ryan misses the trigger on my draw step, and I stay at 35, then play Great Furnace for turn, recasting Etherium Sculptor. I don't pay the 1 for the spell, and Corey chooses to draw yet again, this time dropping to 12. I then cast a discounted Basalt Monolith, letting Corey draw, and he goes to 11. I pass, and on his upkeep, Ryan removes the next to last time counter from his wheel. He replays the forest he had bounced, then taps out to cast Dragon Mage, giving him a second wheel effect for his next turn. He can't pay the study tax, so Corey draws and Ryan misses the Unraveler trigger. Ryan passes, but catches the trigger on Corey's draw step, which brings him down to 10. Corey plays a mountain, then casts Darksteel Ingot. Eduardo responds to the cast by using his top and rearranges the next 3 cards. Then Corey recasts his own Sensei's Divining Top. He passes, and on cleanup is forced to discard 3 to hand size. Eduardo draws for turn and gets plinked, then passes, missing another land. On his end step, I tap the Vault and the Monolith to flash in Kadoltha Forgemaster and Master Transmuter. Corey finally denies a draw, then I untap, drawing for turn and dropping to 34. I untap the Monolith here, but we catch this later. I equip the Skull Clamp onto the Forgemaster, and desperate for lands, I drop Bojuka Bog and exile 2 cards from Ryan's graveyard. I control 7 artifacts, so I tap out and cast Breya, floating 6 blue and getting 2 Thopter tokens when she enters. I spend 1 to cast Izzet Signet, and Corey uses this time to emphasize that he isn't missing his triggers, he's just denying the draws after I don't pay. I then make a deal with Corey where he won't counter my spells if I get rid of the Fate Unraveler. I sacrifice 2 Thopters and spend 2 floating mana to activate Breya's ability, killing it and earning a bonus point. I use 1 more floating mana to re-equip Skull Clamp onto Breya, then pass. On his upkeep, Ryan removes the last time counter from Wheel of Fate and casts it. Because of the weird timing, Corey misses the Rhystic Study trigger. Corey likes his hand though, so he casts Render Silent on the wheel, earning a bonus point and preventing Ryan from doing anything else with his turn. Ryan does drop a Bojuka Bog and exiles my graveyard. Since he can't cast spells, attacking with his wheel on a stick doesn't help, so he passes. Corey activates his top on Ryan's end step, then untaps and has a blissfully painless draw step. He plays a Slayer's Stronghold, a land that can grant haste to his commander, and passes. On Corey's end step, Eduardo uses his own top, then holds priority again. He casts Krosan Grip targeting Breya, and after remembering that Fate Unraveler is gone, he also pays 1 for Rhystic Study. I mistakenly draw 2 cards from Skull Clamp when my commander dies, even though I put her in the command zone, so she didn't technically go to the graveyard. Eduardo untaps, draws, and plays an Evolving Wilds, which he cracks to fetch a basic forest, then passes. On his end step, I start to use Basalt Monolith before we realize that I never should have been able to untap it. 2 mistakes in a row, I'm on a roll. With the board state rectified, I begin my turn. I play Watery Grave, paying 2 life so it enters untapped, and dropping to 32. I cast Chief Engineer, paying 1 extra for the study. Lastly, I equip the Skull Clamp onto Master Transmuter and pass. Ryan draws for turn, then casts Archfiend of Ifnir, which combos quite well with Wheeling. Ryan moves into combat and swings the Dragon Mage at Eduardo, who can't block, and drops to 28. With the triggered ability to discard our hands on the stack, we are eager with responses. Corey casts Mystical Tutor, finding Cyclonic Rift, and puts it on top of his library. He and Eduardo pass priority to me. I tap Master Transmuter, 1 blue, and return Basalt Monolith to my hand to activate her ability. I bring out Mycosynth Lattice before Eduardo announces he wants to respond. We rewind until Master Transmuter's ability is on the stack, and he flashes in Harbinger of the Tides. He returns the Dragon Mage to Ryan's hand, but it's already done damage, so we will still wheel. Eduardo also pays 1 to deny Corey a draw. With that resolved, the Transmuter finally brings in my Mycosynth Lattice, and suddenly the Vault of Kotla Khan is giving me 1 blue for each permanent I control. I tap it for 15 blue and float it. I tap the Kadoltha Forgemaster and sacrifice itself plus 2 other creatures to activate its ability. I fetch Unwinding Clock from library and put it onto the battlefield. I then flash in the Basalt Monolith I bounce to my hand and pay the study tax with my floating blue. Finally, the Dragon Mage's ability resolves, and we discard our hands and draw a new 7. Ryan discarding 5 cards triggers his Archfiend, giving his opponent's creatures 5/1/1 counters, which wipes the rest of the board of creatures. We then all draw 7, me with 2 extra because of the Skull Clamp. Once we're all squared away, Ryan casts Yidris, Maelstrom, Wielder. He can't afford the study tax, so Corey draws a card. We also realize now that Eduardo never put his dead creatures into his graveyard. Ryan passes, and Corey uses the top before taking his turn. Eduardo then joins him, activating his own top for 1. I then untap my board alongside Corey, thanks to Unwinding Clock and Mycosynth Lattice. Corey plays Battlefield Forge, then casts Narset, Enlightened Master. In response, I tap 2 blue mana and pass priority. Eduardo sadly tells us he was forced to discard the disallow he was saving for Narset. With nothing else, Corey passes turn. Eduardo and I untap, and he plays an island. He casts Ring of Evos Isle, paying the Rhystic Study tax, and follows it up with a Bloodforged Battle Axe, also paying the 1. He then passes. I play Temple of the False God, then use the Monolith to cast Dimir Signet, paying the 1. I filter my colors and pay 6 to cast Breya for the second time. I also pay the 1 to deny Corey a draw. And finally, I get 2 Thopter tokens when she enters. I tap the vault for 17 blue mana and use 1 to clamp a Thopter, drawing 2. I tap for black, then spend 2 floating blue to cast Thopter Foundry, plus the tax. I also spend 5 to cast Trading Post, paying the tax. Next, I use 1 mana to equip Breya with the Skull Clamp again, since we realized my misunderstanding after this game was over. Lastly, I spend another floating mana plus 1 life, dropping to 31, to activate the Trading Post and create a 0/1 white goat creature token, which I unfortunately don't have yet. I pass and pitch a land to hand size at the end of my turn. Ryan and I untap, and he draws for turn. Ryan moves into combat and swings both of his 5-power creatures at Corey. Before blocks, Corey casts Cyclonic Rift without overloading it, targeting the Archfiend. He then blocks Yidris with Narset. Before damage, Corey casts Boros Charm, giving his permanents indestructible. Yidris still tramples through for 3 damage though, taking Corey down to 7 and giving Ryan spells Cascade for the rest of turn. In second main, Ryan plays Underground River and recasts Archfiend of Ifnir. He immediately reveals Whisper Silk Cloak and casts it from the Cascade. Corey misses the study trigger for the cloak but does draw off the Archfiend. Ryan then casts Thassa, God of the Sea. He doesn't pay the 1, so Corey draws, and then he cascades. Ryan finds Assassin's Trophy, which he plays, targeting my Unwinding Clock. I find a basic Plains when it gets destroyed. Ryan then casts Farseek, and he cascades, finding Soul Ring. Corey draws from the Farseek, but again misses the Soul Ring Cascade cast trigger, and Ryan finds his basic from Farseek. Lastly, Ryan equips his commander with the Whisper Silk Cloak, and he passes. Corey holds priority on his own upkeep to use his top. Eduardo responds by using his top as well. Corey then draws for turn and plays a Shivan Reef. Moving into combat, Corey attacks Eduardo with Narset since he can't block her. Narset's ability triggers, and Corey exiles the top 4 cards of his library. He can't do anything in combat, so Eduardo takes 3 and drops to 25. In second main, Corey enchants Narset with the Steel of the Godhead she exiled, and then casts Howl of the Horde from hand. He then casts the Beacon of Tomorrows that Narset exiled without paying its mana cost, queuing up 3 extra turns. Corey then casts Jeskai Ascendancy, and lastly, Azorius Signet. He passes, getting ready for his next turn. When I get priority, I activate the Trading Post, paying 1 and sacrificing the Goat token to fetch Shimmermere out of my graveyard to hand. I then flash in the Shimmermere and pay the study tax. Now with the ability to flash in artifacts, I cast Sphinx Summoner and fetch Sharum the Hegemon from library. I then cast Sharum, tapping the vault for around 20 blue mana, and while it's on the stack, Corey activates his top. With no responses, Sharum resolves, and it returns Unwinding Clock to the battlefield. I also flash in a Thopter Assembly, and finally pass priority. Corey and I untap for his first extra turn. On draw, he miracles Temporal Mastery. He moves into combat and swings 5-power at Eduardo, and exiles the next 4 cards. Since Narset now has lifelink, I hold priority before damage and tap for lots of mana. I spend 2 mana and sacrifice the Signets to activate Breya, and deal 3 to Corey, taking him to 4 life. I activate the ability again, sacking a Thopter in the Foundry, and Corey responds by casting the free Factor Fiction he got with Narset. Jeskai Ascendancy triggers, untapping Narset and giving her +1/+1, but he misses the loot effect. He has Eduardo make the piles, and he takes the one with Dissolve that unfortunately can't counter activated abilities. Still before my Breya activation resolves, he activates the top, rearranging the next 3. Corey draws with the top and casts the Path to Exile he found on Breya. I respond by sacking Breya and Sphinx Summoner to her ability, using another 2 floating mana to deal the final 3 to Corey. He has no more responses and dies, taking 4th place. Path to Exile fizzles, and I also make the Skull Clamp mistake again, drawing 2 when Breya was sacrificed. Since Corey leaves the game when he loses, Eduardo immediately starts his turn, and he and I both untap. He pays 5 to cast Kumena again, and then plays an island. He equips the Ring of Evos Isle to her for 1, then passes. On Eduardo's end step, I tap the vault for a lot and flash in Panharmonicon. I also flash in Breya, casting her for the 3rd time and earning a bonus point. She triggers and creates 4 Thopter tokens. I then activate the Trading Post to get Kadoltha Forgemaster back in hand, which I also flash in with my floating blue. Lastly, I cast Swords to Plowshares, targeting the Archfiend of Ithmir, and Ryan gains 5 life, going to 46. I untap and draw for turn. I play Ancient Den, then move into combat and swing 20 damage at Ryan, who drops to 26. I sacrifice 3 artifacts to activate Kadoltha Forgemaster and tutor up Corkplan Ironworks. I then pass turn, but hold priority on Ryan's upkeep after we've both untapped. I activate Kadoltha Forgemaster again in order to bring out Nim Deathmantle. Ryan responds by casting Brainstorm, but he doesn't find any answers. I then demonstrate the infinite combo. I sacrifice Breya to KCI for 2 mana, and then pay 4 to Nim Deathmantle to bring her back from the graveyard. When she enters the battlefield, she makes 4 Thopters, which can also be sacrificed for more mana. In our playgroup, if a player can demonstrate an infinite combo like this, we just say they win, and let other players compete for next place to eliminate Kingmaker situations. Ryan continues his turn beyond upkeep and draws. He moves directly into combat and swings the unblockable Yidris at Eduardo for 5 commander damage and, more importantly, Cascade on his spells. Ryan casts Volcanic Vision, but mistakenly doesn't name a target and immediately cascades. He hits Whispering Madness and both players pitch their hands and draw 5. With Table Talk confusing things, Ryan manages to then return that same Whispering Madness to his hand with Volcanic Vision, dealing 4 to Eduardo's creatures and sending Kumena back to the command zone. Ryan then casts Whispering Madness again, this time from hand, and cascades. He hits Dark Deal, and they discard and redraw -1. Whispering Madness then resolves, meaning they discard again and each draw 4 this time. With nothing else, Ryan passes. After untapping and drawing, Eduardo spends 7 mana to cast Kumena for the 3rd time, earning himself a bonus point. He pays 1 to re-equip the ring, then passes. Ryan scries 1 thanks to Thassa, putting the card on bottom. He plays a basic for turn, then moves into combat, swinging his unblockable commander and taking Eduardo to 15 life. Judges rejoice, that means Ryan gets to cascade some more. He casts a very threatening Guilt Feeder and cascades. Ryan finds Decimate and casts it, targeting Kumena, the Ring of Evos Isle she's wearing, Eduardo's last untapped land, and his own Thassa to make it legal. Eduardo responds by using the land to activate his top, and then the Decimate resolves. Ryan casts Consuming Aberration and cascades. He finds and casts Coiling Oracle, revealing Sakura Tribe Elder, which he puts in his hand. Ryan then casts Raider's Wake from hand and cascades. He reveals Magus of the Wheel, which he casts. Consuming Aberration triggers, and Eduardo reveals a land which he mills. Ryan passes, and Eduardo discards to the Wake trigger, losing 2. Not finding any answers, Eduardo scoops it up. Eduardo came out strong with an aggressive Voltron style, but he didn't find many of his bounce-back mechanisms for the late game. Once Kumena died a few times, she got prohibitively expensive. Salt in the Wound was having 1 mana open during Decimate when the ring's ability to grant hexproof to Kumena costs 2. I only had to deal with 1 board wipe luckily, and I had Scrap Trawler to bounce back. Mycosynthelatus is a powerful card to have with Unwinding Clock or Vault of Kotlakan, but getting it with both, plus a way to flash in artifacts, feels like cheating. Ryan had a bit of an odd game for Yidris, churning through cards and not finding many of his payoffs like Nekusar, Waste Not, or Liliana's Caress, other than the Fate Unraveler that did end up doing a lot of damage. But he did put pressure on the board when it mattered and stuck around to take second. Corey had the unfortunate experience of looking like a menace by drawing cards but not having the board to defend himself. Plus, some opponents didn't really pivot to me when they should have. Narset is a combo-like win, but it doesn't win just immediately, and that delay allowed me to stop him early. If you've never seen Narset before, maybe seeing the 4 extra turns Corey had lined up helps you realize why we were so eager to deal with her. The results for Season 1 Game 1 are... Corey came in 4th place, earning 1 rank point and 2 bonus points, first sweeper and first counterspell. Eduardo came in 3rd place, earning 2 rank points and 1 bonus point from casting his commander 3 times. Ryan came in 2nd place, earning 3 rank points and no bonus points this game. And I came in 1st place, earning 4 rank points and 3 bonus points. First blood, first single target removal, and generalist. Tune in to Season 1 Game 2 where Corey will be playing first and likely seeking revenge.